Have you missed it? Like, do you guys think, I should have got in on Bitcoin?
I don't spend a lot
5 years ago.
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin is something that certainly a lot of people think, is going to rise as an alternative currency.
The Australian Bitcoin Podcast, presented by HardBlock.
It's not a currency, it's not money. I don't understand it.
G'day folks, welcome to the Australian Bitcoin Podcast presented by HardBlock, Australia's best and longest running Bitcoin only exchange. My name's DJ, this is Mike, and this is episode 90, the real episode 90, the only episode 90 in the Australian Bitcoin Podcast universe. There was an aberration in the last show, but that's since been updated. This is episode 90, and in this episode, Mike and I will bring you the best in Australian news, takes and insight from a uniquely Australian perspective, is what I meant to say. Mike, g'day.
How you going, mate?
Good. I'm leaning into this sort of ochre Australian, sort of mildly cringe tone, I think, in or at least for this episode anyway. We're just about to launch our Zero to Hero email sequence for people that are not too familiar with Bitcoin but want to get to know the bare basics. We obviously already have Easy Bitcoin, learn Bitcoin in less than 10 minutes, which you can also download off of our website. But yeah, we've got this Zero to Hero email chain about to launch, which you should send to friends and family. I'll get you the link once it's... Well, keep an eye on our socials. But we were discussing how to open the hello, the greeting of the email, and we weren't sure whether or not hey or hi there.
Hi there. Hi there.
And I think we just settled on g'day because we're Australian and like no one else is. So let's just own it and lean into it.
Love it. Love it. Someone's got to do it. Someone's got to keep the cultural cringe alive. I
think so. I mean, like I haven't got the Winnie Reds yet. I've even got the flannel on today, just to sort of keep it real,
Brilliant.
So we're recording this on Thursday, the 19th of June, 2025. Block height is 901,856. We hit block 900,000 since the last time we talked, and we were on air with Santo a couple of weeks ago. We hit block 900,000 on Friday, the 9th of June. Oh, sorry, the 6th of June. My bad. And the price of Bitcoin, it's holding steady. It's maybe this is not it definitely isn't a new comment, but if you'd have told me, say 4 or 5 years ago that we'd be bored ranging at 100k, I would have laughed at you. I would have thought, what are you talking about? Like that's amazing. But here we are, ranging at 100k, holding reasonably steady above that price, and it's, in terms of price action, it's quite boring, to be honest.
You want either obscene numbers or soul crushing numbers, is that right?
That's exactly
one or
right.
the other.
Like,
you don't
swing me to the extremes. Whoops. I don't. I mean, sats are my stable coin, maybe. I don't know. But, we can't spend them in Australia, can we? I don't know. 100,000, it's a bit boring, to be honest.
Oh, well, it gives us time to, disconnect and look away from the price and look at all the other lovely stuff happening in the world at the moment with World War III potentially unfolding before our eyes and all the other lovely things happening. So, appreciate the decorum in the price action for now.
The calmness. I'll take that. I'm not too up on the current state of global affairs. I try my best nowadays to tune that out. And one of the things I've actually found helps is a meditation regime. But I was talking to an Anon on Twitter a little while ago, Cosmo Crickster, and he says that he uses the Timechain calendar. So you go to timechaincalendar.com and you set the sound settings to be a bell. And every time there's a new block found, it dings a bell. And you can change it to another bunch of other sounds, but the bell works. And I found that if I have that on during the day and I'm working away on whatever, it'll ding every now and again, usually after about 10 minutes. And it just brings you back to the present moment. And it's a nice thing. I like it.
That's nice, man. I've not seen this site before. I've had a look. It's definitely the opposite of my strategy. My strategy is have the Twitter window open, ready to see the next missile strike video get dumped in my doom scrolling feed. And it sustains me, and it keeps my fear levels elevated.
Yeah,
Reminds me
you're
that
running high
I'm
beta
human.
all the time.
That's it. Keeps me in my happy zone of crippling anxiety.
Yeah, like we're not meant to be in that state. Even like a deer, when it gets spooked in the wild and it dashes off into the wilderness, after about 10, 15 minutes of running, it resumes the eating of the grass in a calm manner as if nothing had even happened, because it just doesn't have that, long-term memory to store that shock and awe in. And I think, we do, and that's not always to our net benefit, particularly on the doom scrolling apps,
Yes, mate. I'm the deer that's standing in the middle of the highway, staring at oncoming traffic, eyes taped open,
constantly just too afraid to move, but just want to see what's going to happen. Like
that's it. I just want to see that's exactly it. I want to see what's going to happen. I just want to see what's going to happen.
I can appreciate that, man. I used to do that a lot, but I've decided it no longer serves me, so I've got to let it go.
Good move.
So not a lot has kind of happened in terms of big, headlines over the last 2 weeks, but there's enough to certainly talk about and to get people up to date. We've got core devs justifying their removal of the data carrier limits in Bitcoin Core. We have had obviously Michael Saylor going on a bunch of legacy media, but also that Jordan Peterson interview. I don't know if you saw that. I thought that the second episode was better. It sort of dove more into the economics in and around Bitcoin, and it was doing the rounds for a little bit. I think last week, where Jordan Peterson was asking me about this whole value prop of Bitcoin thing. Like, it seems like it's going to eat everything, and Saylor just flat out says that's the point. That's why I'm here. So that happened. We've got the headline, Ancient Bitcoin Supply Now Outpacing Newly Minted Bitcoin, which is an interesting report from Fidelity. And River recently released their research report on Bitcoin adoption in 2025. There's a bunch of other headlines, but we'll get to them. I think we've got a good show planned. So what are you looking at?
Yeah, well, let's dig into some things. First of all, let's talk about that core dev change that is just that you hinted at there. So we've discussed it briefly on the last 2 episodes. There's a bit of controversy brewing around core devs wanting to remove data carrier caps on the op return portions of Bitcoin transactions. And since we last spoke, they've now confirmed that they're going to go ahead with the change. They've penned a letter trying to justify their position, which we'll link in the show notes, so you can have a read there and get their reasons for pushing forward with the change, which basically amounts to their role as core developers are about building the best software possible to support the relaying of blocks and transactions on the Bitcoin network. And how that space is used is not really their prerogative, or however you say that word. Which,
it's a bit of a cop-out.
It's a bit of a cop-out. It's a bit of a cope. You can somewhat see the angle that they're going for, and they do explicitly state that their change is not explicitly endorsing or condoning non-financial data usage. So for anyone not aware, the issue with this change is that it's going to make it easier for people to put spam on the Bitcoin blockchain. So non-economical data, so your monkey JPEGs, your other garbage that node operators will have to store on their hard drives, at least unless they take particular steps to reduce their exposure to spam on the data that they store on their Bitcoin node. But yes, they've said that it's not their job to police such usage of blockchain space just to provide the best possible software. And then they've said ultimately, because it is a censorship-resistant system, Bitcoin can and will be used for use cases that not everyone agrees on.
Mm-hmm.
So, bit of a cop-out, bit of a disappointing outcome. What's your general feeling on the outcome here?
Oh, look, my general feeling on the outcome is that statement is akin to, you know, a Victorian police officer sort of saying, look, you know, the rubber bullets are in our toolkit. I'm just tasked with keeping the peace. All right, you know, it's kind of like that's kind of my job remit here, and there's no moral or ethical dilemma that enters into their brain. And you know, from a obviously from a purely rational economic perspective, it makes zero sense because Bitcoin is money, and that's the whole point of this project, is to you know, improve the reliability and the hardness and the soundness of literally half of every single trade in the entire world, potentially universe, who knows. But to just suggest that, look, it's just our job to update the software and just to maintain that, it's like, okay. Again, this goes way over my head, and you know, it's not something that I follow too closely, other than the fact that I just don't update the node. Like it's not a problem. But the issue is that it could be mission creep later on, and for new entrants that want to run a node, usually if you download an Umbral instance or something to that effect, it'll just download the latest instance of Core, and that'll just be included into your node without you probably even knowing it. Like the nuance starts to bloat, and it's already hard enough to try and explain Bitcoin to most people, even if they are motivated and interested. Let alone to then go into, well, if you're going to run a node, make sure you know, or we would advise that you run maybe something like Knots or the Bitcoin or a different instance to Core. Yeah. But yeah, I think enough of this has been discussed. You can prune a lot of that data off anyway, which is a good thing. But again, I think it just goes back to that lack of that nuance bloat where newer entrants to the network may not be aware.
Yes, so there are some silver linings here. There's alternate implementations of Bitcoin Core that are gaining traction now. So Bitcoin Knots is the big one. They're now up to, I think, almost 8,000 nodes at last count, and you know that number can be questioned because it is easy to spoof nodes. But 800,000 Bitcoin Knots nodes running at the moment. So
8,000.
That's a pretty good number there. Yep.
Yeah.
And that number is growing as more and more people are put off by the decision by the Bitcoin Core team. The other silver lining is this is a problem that will ultimately solve itself as Bitcoin adoption happens and transaction fees increase and competition for block space increases, and so that suddenly it becomes uneconomical to place a monkey JPEG on the blockchain. So in theory, the problem will solve itself over time. And I mean, it's maybe we'll segue a little bit into what is the problem of spam itself. And there is some interesting data that was put out by mempool.space. So we'll include this in the show notes as well. So mempool.space put out a UTXO set report. Came out last month, but yeah, about a month ago now. And it had some really interesting data that's relevant to this op return data carrier debate. Mm-hmm. So some key numbers. They said 49% of all UTXOs contain less than 1,000 sats, less than $1 worth of Bitcoin, that's interesting. That's obviously a huge UTXO set, which is very close to that, you know, that dust level of value.
Half of them. Wow.
Yeah, half of them. And so that's data that if you run Bitcoin Core by default with no changes, no pruning, you're having those UTXOs sitting there that, you know, taking up your hard drive space. So it's definitely something that's noteworthy. And further, and drilling down, that 30% of that of the UTXO set are inscriptions. So inscriptions are, for anyone not familiar, inscriptions refer to this idea of placing data on the blockchain that is an image or a piece of text or a piece of code or something that is not necessarily related to a financial or economic transaction. It's it's a monkey JPEG that is being minted onto the blockchain. So that is what an inscription is, and that is what many Bitcoiners refer to as spam. It's spam. It's not useful, and obviously there's some subjective arguments there, but that is what inscriptions are. And as a result of this debate and recent letter written by the core devs, I kind of was like, well, what actually is happening with inscriptions at the moment? Has that industry become a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit less degenerate? And I was like, let's actually have a look. And so, I go and look at, there's a company called Melrose PR that is like they're essentially a inscriptions marketing company. Okay. Collectibles marketing company. And I was like, okay, well, what's the latest project they've done that's on inscriptions on the Bitcoin blockchain? So it's called Decentralized Gentleman Club. And you can go to it. It's so it's a bunch of ordinals, and it's disgusting. It's like 100 images. They're all PP the Frog, PP the green meme frog that I'm sure you've seen on Twitter all over the place. But you can tell that all of them are generated by AI. So there's no actual work put in. There's no proof of work. It's just someone sat at ChatGPT. You could just tell by looking at them that these are all generated by ChatGPT's Sora AI image generator. They've put in PP the Frog doing a thing in this style. They've spat them all out. Now they're trying to sell them for around $200, $300 a pop worth of Bitcoin. And
okay,
they're just disgusting. And it's like, this proves that it is correct for someone to think that this is nothing more than spam. This is not legitimate economic activity. This is not adding value to people's lives. These are not genuine collectibles. This is just garbage spam that's taking up space on my hard drives.
I get that argument. I'd still maintain that value is subjective, and so if people do want to invest and ape into shit like that, they're welcome to. I think the real problem is that communication, that bridge, that education layer, where like every now and again, I don't see this as much anymore, but like there's a show we have in Australia called A Current Affair, and they'll always like go after the dodgy scammers and then they'll have like one side of the story where it's like an older couple that put their life savings into, apartment complex A. And then the dodgy developer, leaves the country or whatever and leaves them high and dry, right? And it's this sort of sob piece. And ultimately, you have to do the work, unfortunately, to not get scammed. So value is subject. The issue I get is that then the mainstream sort of like would pick that up. You can imagine like the Daily Telegraph or the Herald Sun or the Guardian probably would pick up a story like that. Like I lost $25,000 of my life savings on whatever that thing that you were talking about before, the Melrose PR, ChatGPT and ordinals or whatever. Yeah. And at no point, because the knowledge, the asymmetric knowledge there of even just the journalist who's supposed to be covering that, won't ask, well, what were you doing, like, investing in shit like that? Like, well, what's that about? Cry me a river. So, yeah, like, you got to touch the stove. And the resources are out there. We've just created learn.hardblock.com.au, which we're going to launch really soon, in order to try and nurse people away from that kind of nonsense. And hopefully so that their first touch point is a little bit more of substance and they can actually get an understanding of Bitcoin and why we're here and why we do what we do. And tens of thousands of others all around the world do what they do in this almost fanatical, obsessive manner. And they get a reason for that, because if you're just coming in for the number go up and the gains, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. it's good that we we sit here and complain about spam and the monkey JPEGs and all this sort of stuff, but we are also at the same time being the change we want to see in the world. We're putting out the good word. We're spinning up educational websites that you can have a look at yourself. You can direct your friends and family to get the real deal, get the raw information about Bitcoin as a monetary system, and not as a monkey JPEG lottery machine.
And we've got a lot of work to do, because if we pivot quickly to the River report, they released a report. So River is an exchange based in the US, excellent exchange, run and co-founded by Alex Leishman. He's a great follow on Twitter. But they released a report, Bitcoin adoption in 2025. And one of the things that stood out for me is in their research, they said that Bitcoin adoption in 2025 is at roughly 3% of its full potential. 3% of the global population have adopted Bitcoin. So we're incredibly early in that regard. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of education and onboarding people and getting the knowledge out there. Thankfully, there are so many resources nowadays. And the beautiful thing about something like learn.hardblock.com.au or the Easy Bitcoin book or the Zero to Hero thing that we're developing here at HardBlock is that your first touch point with Bitcoin maybe is through a friend. They may have recommended HardBlock, and then they can point you here, and we've actually got the resources to kind of hold your hand effectively in terms of your understanding. You still have to do the work though. We can concierge you as much as our resources allow, but ultimately it comes down to you doing the work. So that 3% to get from 3 to 97, we've got to fill that 97% gap. Like we got some work to do,
Yep.
So yeah, the River report was really cool, and that number stood out for me. What else? You read that report, right?
Yeah, some other interesting stats. They're saying that less than 4% of people worldwide own Bitcoin. So if you think of the current supply of Bitcoin that's out there and already been mined, 4% of humans, that's shared amongst 4% of humans. And so there's only so much more to be mined, only a million more coins to be mined, maybe. And still 96% of humans don't have any Bitcoin yet. So it's going to be slim pickings. It also talks about the total addressable market of Bitcoin. It says that Bitcoin's at still less than 1% of its TAM, total addressable market, $2 trillion worth. And it does give this figure, which is, you do wonder how have you really arrived at this figure, saying that Bitcoin's total addressable market is $225 trillion, currently sitting at $2 trillion. And this is based off of, supposedly, there's a total global wealth of $900 trillion. And it's basically making an assumption that Bitcoin should be able to achieve a 50% market share of store of value assets. So we're talking about, gold, fine art, real estate, that sort of stuff. Yeah. Bitcoin will be 50% of that, which makes sense considering how, functional it is as a store of value that is still easily transferable between entities. So it's a very bullish figure to say, okay, of the $900 trillion of global wealth, Bitcoin is going to basically correspond to $225 trillion of that total global wealth. That's pretty bullish. So, we'll approach that. In theory, we'll approach that as adoption increases. As you said earlier, we're sitting at 3%. So we'll see if 100% looks like $225 trillion of global wealth. We'll see if that figure.
The interesting thing is like how quickly does that 3% grow? Is it like how fast does it double? Once a year, once every 2 years, whatever. I mean, price action obviously will have a huge role to play in terms of attracting people into the space. And clearly at 100K, we don't have the speculators, we don't have retail in the market right now, which is odd, but also it kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like retail probably are tapped out. I know through various interactions that I've had on Twitter with people that I know have an issue, have a problem, and you try and present Bitcoin as a solution, and they always just reject it because they simply don't have that extra capital at the end of the week, to speculate in their minds anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think I've got a pretty, you might call it bearish, but I think it's a pretty realistic take that, we're sitting at 3% adoption. We're sitting at less than 4% of people own Bitcoin. I like to apply the 80-20 rule to all things. And I think that the adoption is going to get to that 20%, like 20% of people, 20% of average punters will be quote unquote Bitcoiners in some way, shape or form.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be significant adoption amongst institutions and governments, as we're starting to see now, and we'll talk about a bit later. There's very frothy corporate adoption happening right now. The number of companies that are just spinning out headline after headline, we're doing a Bitcoin Treasury strategy. That is copied and pasted 100 times in the last month. There's going to be this sort of like 20% of people are in the Bitcoin space in one way, shape or form. And the rest of the 80% are probably going to be in some kind of stablecoin game, which we'll talk about later off the back of the, what's the bill called? The Genius Act.
Genius Act,
So
yeah.
we'll talk about that in a moment as well. But yeah, I'm thinking that it's going to be about this 20% figure. It's going to be people that are Bitcoiners in some way, shape or form.
Well, an interesting story, just anecdotally in terms of adoption and stuff. There was a friend of mine that I've been talking on and off about Bitcoin for a long while now, I suppose. In fact, one of the first times I got him to download like a Wallet of Satoshi app, and I sent him, I think at the time might have been like 1,000 sats or something, which was a chunk of change actually back then. But he, like, his first question was, so do you have to pay tax on that? Yeah. And it kind of threw me through a loop because I was like, well, my expected response was, wow, that's incredible. Did I need to like give an email or sign up or anything like that? No, it was just, is this a taxable event?
It's the slavish nature that's been imprinted on us.
It was pretty sad.
Oh, do we have to? I need to pay my dues to the state for these numbers you've blessed upon
You
me.
just sent me 1,000 sats for free.
Pay penance to the state.
Oh man! So a couple of weeks ago, I think it might have been last week. It's kind of not really relevant, but he was a victim, I suppose. It's probably an acceptable word here, of the Choke Point 2.0 shenanigans that are still going on, particularly here in Australia. And I get it; like it's not the bank's fault necessarily. They've got instructions from on high, and they've become proxy police force. That's kind of their deal. But anyway, he got. He was watching Kathy Wood on Diary of a CEO and texted me and he's like, is it a good time to buy Bitcoin? I was like, bro, it's always a good time to buy Bitcoin.
Are you looking for a simple way to buy Bitcoin in Australia? HardBlock makes buying Bitcoin easy. As Australia's longest running Bitcoin exchange, our mission is to help Aussies simply and easily buy Bitcoin and take it into self-custody. There are no deposit or trading fees, just a clear 1.2% spread whenever you buy or sell, lol. That covers our operating costs, so you always know exactly what you're paying. Withdrawals are just $1.18 AUD or as low as 400 sats with AutoSend. No hidden charges, no surprises, just a fast, reliable, and easy way to stack sats with total transparency. Get started today at hardblock.com.au. Bitcoin made easy for Aussies.
And then he went to go buy some, and he got locked out of his account, and he had to run payroll that day, and he was like aghast. He couldn't believe that he all of a sudden didn't have access to the money in his bank account. And so he touched the stove that day. And, I think that's to get to that 20% that you're talking about of adoption, to grow that from 3 to say, another 70%, more and more people have to touch the stove. It's kind of like I watched Alec Gleason talking about Noster on Citadel Dispatch, and most people aren't going to flood to these decentralized systems until they have a problem. And that's kind of the reality. So obviously our role is to educate and to make sure that those that have the problem know where the safe haven is, and maybe those smart enough to maybe foresee a problem or even just front run that issue, they will be able to do it with resources like we're providing. But I mean, to get to 225 trillion, we got a long way to go.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. On that topic of Operation Choke Point 2.0, obviously over in the US they've overtly stated, old mate JD Vance said there was a call for an end to Choke Point 2.0 at the Bitcoin 2025 conference last month. But it seems like obviously in Australia we're always slow on the uptake in terms of our government and their policy making. I wonder if at some point we need to do a naming and shaming of what our current institutions here in Australia are doing to Aussies in regards to saying what they can and can't do with their money. I don't know if that's appropriate for the show or not.
I don't know, man. I'm down with it personally. If you think of it from a customer service standpoint, I get the incentives from the bank because you're effectively dematerializing yourself by actively allowing those outflows into a completely parallel system, monetary system. But at the same time, more so, I think from a political perspective, you have a duty. The whole point of being a politician is that you're a public servant. And if you're a public servant, that means you need to go and get me a glass of water when I ask for it. Like, that's your job, And so the other job you have is to, keep people safe and effective and all of that other shit. Well, you're clearly preventing them from improving their standing in life. Improving their lifestyle, improving their ability to get ahead, to save. I mean, we can wax lyrical until the cows come home about the current state of the housing crisis in this country. And, we point to data when we do it that's like 2 or 3 months old, and the rest of it's hidden behind paywalls. And we all know the issue. Everyone knows the issue, but everyone doesn't want to talk about the problem, which is, credit expansion, money printing, right? So you're actively harming, effectively, a nation. And don't get me started on all of that, because I could I could go down treasonous rabbit holes and cry treason for a lot of these
Bitcoiners. We love a bit of treasonous talk. We love a bit of treason talk here in the Bitcoin world.
100%. I saw a GK Chesterton quote just recently, and it really stuck out in my mind. It was really good. It basically says, "It is not for politicians to refuse to tolerate a thing because it is called a miracle. The greatest miracle is the fact that politicians are tolerated."
Very good.
His turn of phrase is amazing, and but that's it. Like, why do we tolerate this stuff? You know what I'm saying? Why do we even and then like locate the locate to you? So we'll pivot to treasury companies for a sec. Obviously, they're the name of the game right now, and a lot of these people, it's probably a bit disingenuous actually call them Bitcoin treasury companies, particularly if they're just issuing equity, and they're not actually storing any actual Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Anyway, so obviously you've got that in the list. Bitcoin treasury strategy that's reanimating all of these zombie companies like MicroStrategy, and Saylor actually mentioned that in his chat with Peterson. You would consider
MicroStrategy a zombie company?
Not anymore, but it was. It absolutely was for about 20 years, man. And he admits that in that Peterson interview, which is worthwhile. It's on his YouTube channel. Worthwhile looking at, because he said, that it didn't matter what we did in terms of innovation, we were always lagging behind, the the big FANG stocks. And we couldn't figure out how to squeeze any more juice out of this lemon. So, we just sort of aped in 500 million into Bitcoin, and the rest is history.
Yep. The first movers, and they've clearly started the fire, because we've seen just in the last few months, the number of companies suddenly switching and following suit has just exploded. And I don't think people have grokked how much this is happening. So for anyone that's unaware, a zombie company basically refers to a company that they're stagnating. They're not growing. They've kind of lost their mojo. They're not really sure what they're doing. They might be sitting on a stack of cash. They might be sitting on a stack of assets, or GameStop is another good example. It's a company that's in this retail bricks and mortar game selling space in a world where people are moving to digital subscriptions and digital platforms. So why do you need a physical store anymore? So they're kind of in limbo. And rather than just continuing to shuffle forward as a zombie, or dissolve or close or shift and do whatever, the hot new trend is just stack Bitcoin. Issue a bunch of stock and announce a treasury strategy, buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and suddenly it's turning a bunch of companies that were just these shambling zombies into real players. So MicroStrategy, now called Strategy, is probably obviously the biggest example of that. They're now sitting on 592,100 Bitcoin. That's nuts. And when you consider the overall amount of Bitcoin only being that 21 million number, they're sitting on a decent hoard there. But they've now triggered all these other companies to start following suit. And they're all companies that you wouldn't expect. They're not, your typical financial instrument companies like Strategy is. We've got Quantum Biopharma. We've got Belgravia Hartford. We've got F Street, Metaplanet, Bluebird, a gold mining company, a UK-based gold mining company, Bluebird. They're now converting profits into a Bitcoin treasury reserve. Smarter Web Company, a web development company, is now stacking Bitcoin. Another healthcare firm, Prenetics, $20 million of Bitcoin purchased.
And Locate Technologies in Australia.
Yep.
And the CEO was
a delivery company.
Yeah, it's taken a lot of willpower to not respin up my old ComSec account and just smash by $50, $100 of.
So you want to be a bit of a degenerate, mate.
Oh, mate, 100%. It's taken a lot of inner strength. I mean, it's down 13% from its recent high. June's been a pretty nice month for Locate. It reached a peak of 17 cents per share. So it's definitely in the hot copper, small cap playbook. But, it's, you just wonder, man, you could buy it.
It's all degeneracy. It's all degeneracy. You gotta hold true to your principles and values. Mm-hmm. The one that I might have been thinking down a similar road, but then when I was sort of looking at all these companies stacking Bitcoin now, I got to one that's called ANAP, ANAP. It's a clothing company, a clothing shop in Japan. They've stacked 687 Bitcoin, and they've got a goal of 1,000 Bitcoin.
God bless.
This is just this is insane.
Well, there was a coffee shop, wasn't there, in Europe that made headlines for becoming a Bitcoin treasury company or something. It's
and it's just bizarre. Are we because despite the value that we place in savings is good, stacking Bitcoin is good, it's all good stuff, but in a world where people are like, oh, why bother having a coffee shop when I could just stack Bitcoin instead? I'm not going to open another coffee shop to serve customers. I'm just going to keep my one coffee shop and issue equity and buy Bitcoin. It's so degenerate when you really think about it. It speaks
volumes, though, to the economic incentives that the system is wrought. They can't justify the providing of more value on another high street elsewhere, and just the absolute hurdle rate that it is to open up a whole other shop
because of all the bureaucracy, red tape,
because of all the
taxes,
nonsense. So it's like, all right, well, sweet, we'll just stack coin instead, and that's the thing. But I mean, these new Bitcoin treasury companies are definitely echoing the 2017 ICO craze, and the ordinals. Like it's almost like this is it, like I love Bitcoin, buy my paper Bitcoin sort of thing, my IOU Bitcoin. And again, it could just be growing pains. It probably is. It's really difficult to expect everybody to just immediately grok like Bitcoin, like you and I have, and a lot of our friends and colleagues and stuff, because we already put in those 100 hours, 1,000 hours, whatever. It's just they're looking for a return. They're just being tapped out. There's nowhere in the market that can give them a return, and so they're like, probably even reluctantly, just being like, okay, cool, let's just check this Bitcoin thing in. It seems to be working for strategy and Metaplanet and blah blah blah. So I don't know. Can it hurt?
And I think the advice I want to give, not financial advice, obviously, is there is this call to play the degenerate game of looking at all these different companies doing all these different shenanigans, and there are returns to be made in these sorts of I would call them follies, because for every person that does make out, there's someone else getting burned. And, it just reminds us of the meme, right? Which is just to be humble and just stack Bitcoin instead. It's just that classic one. What really made me realize that is we may be going into peak degeneracy in Bitcoin right now. We might be there. And the one that made me think that is this headline, Bitwise debuts first ever GameStop covered call ETF. And this is just the biggest word salad investor bro stuff I've ever read. And it's disgusting. And I hate that it's attached to Bitcoin in such a way. So GameStop, there's this, the GameStop stock investment
It's
thing
like
that's been
EB
simmering.
Games.
Yeah.
Like it's
for the past 4 years.
Bricks and mortar thing. It's just...
Yeah. It's bricks and mortar, EB Games. And then there's been this short squeeze happening with GameStop forever now, that you can read about, Wall Street bets, all that sort of stuff. But recently they've now started stacking Bitcoin. They've now got 4,710 Bitcoin. So $500 million worth of Bitcoin in this, basically a zombie company. And then this company, Bitwise, I'm just going to read this because it's just the biggest word salad investor bro thing. So they released a GME option income strategy ETF called IGME, the first ever covered call ETF centered around GameStop. The first covered call strategy built around GameStop, a stock whose historic volatility and growth potential make it a strong fit for this approach. With IGME, investors now have access to an option income ETF based on an equity that sits at the intersection of retail investor popularity, traditional revenue generating business, and digital asset adoption. So you can now, these guys have built a financial product, financial vehicle based on a company that is a zombie company that is obsolete in many ways, that is now just stacking Bitcoin. You can now buy a vehicle that promises a financial return based on this zombie company stacking more Bitcoin. Or you could just buy Bitcoin. It boggles my mind that people will buy this. That there is a market for this sort of thing. It's peak degeneracy.
It's probably not even like people. It's hedge fund managers and
it's probably bots as well.
Legacy
right?
bros,
it's
bots.
just like automated bots. Just like, yeah.
Well, they've just been programmed to have a return, irrespective of whether you're a bot or a human. But you got to meet a particular return, and you're just looking around for product. You're just looking around for product. You're not looking for the safe haven of a bearer instrument. Self custody, spot Bitcoin purchase that you can because let's be honest, there's not a heck of a lot you can do yet with Bitcoin other than sell it for more fiat, which is kind of like holding gold and selling it for more seashells. It's a stupid thing to do, you know. So as more and more sort of, I guess, loan products and things come on board, you know, that will shift, and maybe the value prop will shift therefore as well. But yeah, the degeneracy will continue until morale improves. That's kind of
that's it.
The TLDR there. Just off the back of that, though, we've got this headline: Ancient Bitcoin supply now outpacing newly mined Bitcoin. This was a report from Fidelity, which basically wrote over 17% of all Bitcoiners remain untouched for a decade, while 27 public companies hold more than 800,000 Bitcoin combined. Give us a TLDR of this report from Fidelity.
Yeah, so basically it's now saying that there's a threshold has been crossed where the amount of new Bitcoin being mined through the process of Bitcoin mining that adds new supply into the market has now slowed to a point where it is the amount of Bitcoin being added to the network is now lower than the amount of Bitcoin that is crossing over this threshold of being what's called ancient Bitcoin. So ancient Bitcoin is this term used to classify Bitcoin that has not moved in over 10 years. So that's obviously Satoshi's bags that are sitting there, humbly gaining value over time. And yeah, any other UTXOs that have just sat there for 10 years, the amount of Bitcoin that is crossing over into that ancient Bitcoin moniker is now higher than the amount that is being added to the total supply through the process of mining. So it's an interesting little threshold there, interesting little milestone that's been ticked over there.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's it just never ceases to amaze me, some of the data points and just the information that you can glean from just this one neutral protocol for transferring value across space and time. Ultimately, you know, let's not overcomplicate it. Bitcoin is money. And if you want even just a tiny little bit more nuance from that, Bitcoin is black market money. Maybe we shouldn't say that on on an exchange funded show, but that's the truth. And like, Bitcoin is permissionless. It's permissionless
because only
money.
terrorists use Bitcoin, right? Only terrorists, right? And drug dealers. They're the only ones who use Bitcoin, right?
No, that's not correct at all. It's humble sat stackers. It's people trying to improve their own lives, their family's life, the life of potentially generations to come. It's people that think in 100-year time frames and timelines rather than 1 to 6 months or even 1 month timelines. I mean, just the dichotomy or the sheer opposites of what we're trying to escape. It couldn't be more disparate. You know, it's complete. The fiat system is toxic, unhealthy, abusive financial system, monetary system, socio-cultural, civilizational system. It's decivilizing. Fiat money is a decivilizing thing. It's a toxicity that courses through the veins of our economic system globally. And we are trying to remove ourselves from that, you know, and slowly but surely, we're kind of like white blood cells, slowly just getting out of the body, and and trying to. But
it's a game. It's a fine game, you know, playing that, walking that line without falling into all these degenerate things happening. It's it's a balancing act.
I'll stop looking at locate technologies, I promise.
But yeah, on that game of adoption, you know, countries are starting to wisen up to the realities of it as well and hedge their bets. So, obviously, the US government's the main one making moves there, but even Thailand. So, for any Australians that have, you know, shipped themselves over to Thailand to escape our lovely prison colony over here, they've just approved a 5-year Bitcoin and crypto tax break. So, exempting capital gains tax on crypto profits between now and 2029 to try and spur global investment into Thailand. So it's an interesting one. If anyone's lucky enough to already be set up shop over there in Thailand, stacking Bitcoin using just a caveat is that it's only through Thai regulated entities. So you had to be buying Bitcoin through a regulated entity through the Thai system. But yeah, those gains are now exempt from capital gains tax. So if you've ever been wondering about where to try to set up shop for future investments or your future business, Thailand is not too far away from here, and they're starting to be more crypto friendly, Bitcoin friendly. So that stuck out to me as something interesting for Australian Bitcoiners.
Yeah, most definitely. And Thailand's, I got a bit of time for Thailand in terms of their beaches and just, I mean, the humidity is actually pretty fucking awful.
Not the ladyboys?
No, funnily enough, no. Look, to each his own, you know. Have you seen? I don't know. There was a reel getting around. It's pretty gross actually. It was a bunch of like older white dudes, you know, in like those cafeteria eateries that they have around the country.
Sure.
All just with, you know, young ladyboys, ladies, whatever. On it's just like, oh come on, man! Like,
yeah, that's another form of degeneracy, right? Like we've got our financial degeneracy, and then we've got straight old-fashioned degeneracy in the sex tourism stuff, which is,
and you know what?
just
It's
as bad.
No disrespect, but if the shoe fits, it's all boomers.
Bloody boomers! They're at it again.
It's all boomers, man. I've been listening to a lot of lectures recently from like the 60s and 70s featuring like Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert and a few others, and they're all thinking they were changing the world and for the better. And maybe those people individually certainly did that, and I think that's all you can really hope for, is to change it on an individual level. But I mean, good grief! They've just completely nuked the whole hope and potential for any future generations. They're not even bringing the ladder up. They're just like smashing the rungs off and just, you know, sorry about it. We're going to Thailand.
Well, I maintain that the Australian economy is set up to give boomers 15 years of comfortable retirement before it all goes to shit, and they've shuttled off to the modal coil. We're left to pick up the pieces, but for the next 15 years it'll limp along nicely enough while they go on holidays to Thailand, and then we're going to be left in a bit of a degenerate storm left over, but that's fine.
If you're a base boomer
your time
and you're interested in Bitcoin, you know, we sign up. Absolutely. We don't discriminate here. We're just painting with the broadest brush for the lols, really. But yeah, there's no boomer hate on this pod. It's just maybe I don't know what the word is. Frustration.
We have plenty of hate for everyone equally.
No. Hate and anger is not a functional commodity in my playbook anymore. I'm moving away from that.
Fair enough.
It's part of getting older.
Let's talk about the Genius Act, because I think it is relevant. So, for anyone not aware, the Genius Act stands for, in the US fashion of naming their bills and changes in these horrible acronyms like the Patriot Act after 9/11 and that sort of thing. So the Genius Act, Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for US Stablecoins Act, has just been passed in the US Senate, voted for 68 to 30 votes. So passed, and basically what it is, it's a regulatory framework, or at least government's blessing to create a regulatory framework around financial institutions in the US, banks, financial vehicle companies, to go all in on stablecoins. So for anyone not aware, stablecoin is like Tether or USDT, USDC, examples of stablecoins that are pegged 1-to-1 to the value of the US dollar. And the idea is that the US kind of sees the writing on the wall with the fiat system. It's going to just continue to spiral and grind to a halt. And this stablecoin play is the latest in a series of attempts to gracefully move on to a new system, or at least arrest the fall of the fiat system. So I personally maintain that in 5 or 10 years, we will see a significant portion of global economic activity on stablecoin rails, mostly through Tether. We'll see a lot of third world countries, as their currencies continue to suck, their people will turn to stablecoins, US dollar backed stablecoins, to conduct business and to try and save money. Obviously, this is still a bit of a fallacy because it's pegged to the US dollar, which itself is still an inflationary currency. But the theory is that they can inflate synthetic stablecoins instead of having to just inflate the existing balloon of the US dollar pile, I guess you could say. So anyway, US is going all in on stablecoins. Tether is an interesting one. They're an incredibly profitable business. They are Bitcoiners at heart. They stack Bitcoin. They have Bitcoin as their sort of like treasury that underpins the company and its ability to issue stablecoins. So it is ultimately a win for Bitcoin and Bitcoin's value proposition. But yeah, we're going to see a lot more stablecoin degeneracy as the years roll on now.
Yeah. I like what Seyfedin spoke about at the Bitcoin 2025 in Las Vegas, where he effectively sort of referenced, I think that guy's Brent. Gosh, I can't remember his last name. He's the dollar milkshake theory guy. But effectively, he was kind of leveraging off the back of that. And he said that, like, we'll regulate crypto, regulate Bitcoin, whatever. It's just becomes just again, the Trojan horse, a backdoor to push people towards Bitcoin ultimately, and effectively destroy monetary sovereignty. In the end, it is what it is. We can't really, what would you say? We can't change it. So we're just, the saying goes, stay humble, stack sats, right? Like that's
it.
So good.
That's all we can do. Shall we just rattle off a few more headlines before we move on?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've got any pertinent to Australia, I did want to just quickly touch on this quantum computing thing. And I know it's like people aren't really exactly talking about it. It pops its head up every now and again. And I suppose if you're new to Bitcoin, you may have probably heard like quantum theory, or rather quantum computing could just, take all of our Bitcoin. And so what's the point? But Taj Dryja, who obviously was one of the co-authors of the Lightning Network paper, on the Bitcoin dev list, he was talking about proposing a way of acknowledging that it could be a problem right now. Like, we don't need to freak out about it. But he put forward this sort of soft fork, this idea for a soft fork, which means that we could have something in place to mitigate any threat from quantum computing, if that were to arise. And so it's this clever way of putting your Bitcoin into a locked box. I guess this is the sort of like the layman's understanding, which is like right up my alley. You broadcast the box now, and only later do you reveal the key to open it. And if someone tries to break in early, like a quantum attacker, they can't steal your Bitcoins because the key isn't actually visible until it's safe and spendable. So I just thought that was an interesting. It's always interesting to follow that list, even though most of the content goes over my head. I follow the dev list and the newsletter and the updates, just to sort of be abreast of those sorts of things. And I just thought that was really interesting, is that there are people thinking about this problem and proposing potential solutions that don't necessarily involve a hard fork, which is cool.
That's good. It is reassuring that people are thinking about that now, because that is often trotted out as a bit of FUD on Bitcoin in general. Is what about quantum? What about quantum?
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that people are already looking at it and looking at solutions is Good thing.
It's a good thing.
So can rattle off a few more headlines and then we can shuttle off. The BlackRock ETF has officially made history as being the fastest ever ETF to...
Amazing.
What's the threshold actually? So it's surged past... So BlackRock has a Bitcoin ETF called iShares Bitcoin Trust, IBIT. It surged past $70 billion in assets under management, reaching the milestone in just 341 trading days.
Less than a year. That's insane.
Less than a year. So the fastest ETF in history to do that. For contrast, the previous record holder was a gold ETF that took 1,691 days to do the same thing.
It's amazing.
The Bitcoin one did in 1 year. So 5 times faster. So, yeah, BlackRock's helping to pump our bags. Rennick was right.
Yeah, thank you, Uncle Larry. Appreciate that.
So in Australian news, there's not really too much happening in Australia in regards to Bitcoin-related stuff. There were a couple of quick headlines. There was a financial advisor that's been banned for 10 years who was taking people's investments and dumping them in an unregulated shitcoin exchange, and basically just funneling the money away and not really providing any tangible, like actually holding crypto or Bitcoin for her clients. So just be mindful out there who you are trusting as your financial advisor. Obviously, we're not financial advisors. We don't provide financial advice, but even people that do have a license to provide financial advice, they can still screw you over. So that's where it comes back to, the classic, we've said it 1,000 times, stay humble and just stack sats, is often the best option available to you, because then you're not relying on someone that's even got all the regulations in the world and all the licenses in the world, can still do the wrong thing and screw you over.
It's a nice little counterfactual to use against anyone that brings that up as FUD. I've got friends that are like, well, I brought it up with my financial advisor and they suggested that it's too risky and blah, 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 blah. And, it's because they know you. They know who you are, and they don't associate you with sound financial advice, which is like fair enough, whatever.
They've seen you at your worst,
yeah,
so why
right.
would I listen to this person for...
Fuck would I listen to this guy? Mike. Awesome. As I said at the top of the show, we've got a few educational platforms we're going to launch very, very soon on our learn.hardblock.com.au page. That website is nearly ready to go. And we've also got our Zero to Hero email sequence, and that also is associated with the Learn page as well. And don't forget, we've got the Easy Bitcoin books. I will just shout out that I have received a bunch of requests from a number of meetups and meetup organizers around Australia requesting they get their hot little hands on this Easy Bitcoin book, Learn Bitcoin in 10 minutes or less. So we'll be posting those out very soon. And if you are a meetup organizer or somebody that hosts a gathering of Bitcoiners or newbies doing a show or whatever, we can post out a stack of books. We just got some printed out, and they'll go out in lots of 20. So if you do want you get your hands on one of those or a stack of those for your meetup, shoot us a DM on Twitter. You can follow us at HardBlock BTC on Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to echo the, hopefully by the time you listen to this recording, we'll have that Learn website open, so learn.hardblock.com.au. Be a good resource that anytime someone wants to learn about Bitcoin, friend or family member, and you don't have the time to walk them through it, just send them that link. They can, take it as they go, take it through different steps, and then sign up to the Zero to Hero mailing list there and get some more lessons dropped into their inbox. And then they can chat to us when they're ready to make that next step.
That's it. And also tune into Australian Bitcoin Podcast. We do this every fortnight, thereabouts. We've got a guest on the next time we meet here, Mike, to discuss, I guess, the fortnight's events. And until then, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks very much, mate.